Hello guys, we are here at Como Park in Minnesota, right down from the Fantasy Flight Games Event Center. I'm joined by Andrew Navaro, the head of the studio, and we're gonna have a conversation, talk about all sorts of things regarding FFG, so stick around. Andrew?
Hi, Steven.
How are you, man?
Good, how are you?
It's good to see you. Let's talk about the reality of our history and get into your history in doing so. So whenever we first met, it was a couple years ago at Worlds, we were recording like an X-Wing match, and then you rolled up and you said, hey, how are you guys? I'm the art director at Fantasy Flight Games. And we said, hey, and we talked for a bit and talked about art and the selection process and these kinds of things. And now, only a couple of years later, you're running the studio. So that's a pretty cool escalation of your job duties. What's the whole history of you at Fantasy Flight?
Well, I've been working at Fantasy Flight for almost 13 years now.
Nice.
And I've done a lot of different things. I've been in a lot of different roles. I started in 2004, late 2004, in customer service.
Nice.
So
run the crucible there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it was really fortunate for me to even get in. My wife just suggested to me when I was looking for a job, and we knew Fantasy Flight was local, and I had contacted them in the past to try to get freelance illustration work, which I was turned down for. But I knew they were there, and she's like, well, you should just check to see if they're hiring. So I went on the website, and they were hiring for a customer service job, and there was only one customer service job.
Yeah.
Applied, got it. And for about 2-ish months, I did customer service, which was, like answering the phones.
Yeah.
It was doing parts replacements, and it was also organized play support at the time. So
all wrapped in one.
Yeah, we did like Gold Dragon Redemption, and I don't know if you remember that from the old Game of Thrones CCG.
I don't even know if I was born then, Andrew, to be honest with you.
So it was a bunch of stuff, but then I didn't do that for very long. Then a graphic design position opened up, and I applied for that, and I didn't have a graphic design portfolio at the time. So I remember talking to Brian Schomburg, who's still the graphic design manager, and saying like, I'm really interested in doing this job, but I don't have anything like prepared. Could I have you think I could have like a week or two or something to put something together? He's like, oh yeah. So we talked to Chris, and then he went and talked to Chris. It's like, oh, and then he's like, yeah, he's cool with you applying for this job. It's like, oh, that's great. And then later on in that day, it was like a Friday. Dr. Chris is like, yeah, I hear you're interested in applying for the graphic design job. I'm like,
nice.
Yeah. He goes, all right, well, cool. Well, bring in your stuff on Monday, and we'll,
and you had
take
nothing.
a look at it. I had nothing. So I spent the entire weekend, pretty much every hour of the day, got very little sleep, just putting together stuff that I thought was appropriate.
Yeah.
Made like a fake book, made a whole like big mock box that I glued on top of my copy of War of the Ring, and brought it in on Monday. Showed it to him, and then talked about it. And I knew it was going well when he started to critique, I think you could do something a little bit different with this logo here, and move it down a little. I'm like, all right, good.
Yeah.
This is good. So anyway, I got that job. And I did graphic design for a long time, almost 6 years. And during that time, I kind of dabbled in art direction a little bit. We didn't really have an art department necessarily.
Yeah.
We eventually got an art coordinator, Zoe Robinson, who was in FFG for a very long time, and she kind of was the art department, Department of One, for a very long time. But then as we got larger, we kind of needed to make it into a more of a full-fledged department with more staff, because we had so many games, we were buying so much art. And when that opportunity came up, Chris was like, hey, I know you've always said you've been interested in doing art direction. What do you think about being an art director? And I was like, yeah,
sure,
great, let's do it. So I did that for like 3 years, and then was presented another opportunity to go work in our digital and our media interactive team to work on some video game stuff, and then to work on our app integrated board games. So I did that for about 1.5 years, and then after that I became kind of the general creative director of the studio, responsible for art, graphic design, sculpting. I did that for about 1 year, and then I started doing this, head of the studio in January.
Wow, what a journey!
Yeah, man.
How big was FFG when you got there?
I was the 17th staff member That's not like in the history, but like in the building at that time, I was number 17.
And so now you're the head of the studio.
Yeah.
And so what does that entail?
So my responsibilities are pretty much just all like the creative aspects of making games. So I work with the game designers, the producers, the developers, still with the graphic designers and the art directors, sculptors, just on making like cool products.
Yeah.
And it's my responsibility to make sure that those are done well, they're delivered on time, and they're high quality.
Well, that's a tall task.
Not really. I mean, everyone who works at F&G is awesome. We're incredibly talented staff. It makes who care about what they do. I don't have to crack the whip on them to make this make this thing good. It's like they want to make it good, and they will, and they always do. So it's really just taking care of the little details. That's
good feedback from the head of the studio. Can you make this good, please?
Yeah, that's right. I'm thinking we'll make a good game.
What's
this time.
Can you just walk me through really quick the process of a game going from nothing to production?
Sure.
Once it gets to you and out the door, how does that whole thing move through?
Again, it kind of varies. I think that's one of the challenging things about making games is that every game we do is unique in some way. So the journey that it takes is unique also. But generally speaking, it'll start with a vision. We'll have an idea for a product or for a game, for an expansion, whatever. It just starts with just a document that we or a conversation that then leads to a document that we can kind of map out the details in a rough form that goes through a little bit of an approval process, and then it goes on to the designer or developer and producer who's working on it to kind of bring it into a prototype state.
Okay.
And from there, they refine and work and refine and get it going until they feel it's good enough to move on to putting more meat on the bone. They feel good enough about the mechanics or the content of the product to push it on to graphic design. Mm-hmm. Graphic design starts to do their work and starts to make it look like a thing you might actually want to purchase. And then that goes through some more testing.
Uh-huh.
And once that's all done, we make a bunch of revisions, buy some art, do some sculpting.
Yeah.
Get all that stuff together, make it all nice and shiny, and then we hand it off to Asmodee.
Wow. What a cool journey that must be to see.
It sound really simple.
All these products come through, yeah. So you've done this a lot, of course. Fantasy Flight continues to put out more and more games, more content as you guys get bigger. Tell me about 2016 kind of leading up to now. So I know you probably have to rewind the clock an extra year to kind of get back in that space. But what are you particularly proud of, or you think is the most interesting that Fantasy Flight has brought to the table?
Well, I think we've done a lot of stuff, like you said. It's hard for me to really recall exactly what this past year is like from a public's perception, because the world that I'm working in is already several months removed. So the things that I'm personally really excited about are it's mostly stuff that I can't talk about. But over the past year, as far as releases, really excited about Mansions of Madness, and I think that game is a great actualization of our promise of bringing technology to board games and having a really awesome app integrated board game experience. I don't think there's anything quite like that game out there. I've never played anything else like that game. I'm really proud of it. It's very immersive. It's really cool. And I think the initial feeling for some people when they see that game is they feel like that app or that tablet is going to get in the way
mm-hmm.
of their board game experience, but it doesn't at all. It only enhances it. And I think every time I've played that game, it feels very communal, and it's what you come to tabletop for.
Yeah.
So that's been great. We announced Runewars last year at Gen Con, and that's finally hitting. That came out just a couple weeks ago. I'm very excited about that. I'm super excited about the stuff that we have coming out for it and the stuff that we've been working on. It's really cool to do to have like an honest to goodness miniatures game.
The old rank and file minis game.
Yeah, guys that you assemble and you paint, and I've always loved miniatures games. Like that's the thing that really kind of got me into the hobby a long ago. So it's really exciting for me to be part of that and to see that grow into what it's become in my mind, and like from the public's perception. Like all we have is a core set.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more. So that's been really exciting. Really proud about that. And then obviously we just announced the official announcement of the Legend of the Five Rings core set that'll be coming out in a few months. And that's very exciting. I'm really excited about that game in particular. I'm also really like card games.
Yeah.
I love and competitive card games especially. And I think that one is very, very special. Like I haven't felt as good about one of our LCGs since Netrunner. And Netrunner, I play all of our games, at least once at some point. I don't necessarily like get into the hobby of our games,
like as a personal
thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm soaked in it like all day. So oftentimes when I go home, I just want to do something else. But that wasn't the case with Android Netrunner at all. I really got into that game and I played it a lot for about a couple years. So I feel like that could probably happen again with Legend of the Five Rings. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited about that. I feel like there's something.
Yeah, there's a big elephant in the room. Another Lucas Litzinger game.
Oh yeah, Destiny. That thing.
The dive into collectible games.
Yeah.
How is that whole thing been? Because collectible games are essentially kind of a jungle, from what I can gather, in terms of how you produce them and how you have to manage rarity, and of course how you have to output so much art and content for set after set after set every 3-4 months. Like, how's Destiny been?
Destiny's been awesome. It's we've never had a game hit as hard as Destiny has, in my experience. Like the demand for it has been far more than we expected or could have hoped for.
Yeah.
We never really go into any of our games like expecting them to be like a big, huge success home run. We're always kind of just have like tempered conservative expectations about our stuff. So to see it explode like it has been, it's really exciting. It's super cool.
Yeah.
We're working really hard to keep that train rolling from our perspective. So yeah, and I like the public reception to it has been great. Like that was really exciting. I think you were here for were you here for the Star Wars Destiny launch event, or was it?
I was not.
You?
It was just Zach and
you
and Jonathan.
Right.
Spoiler: there were other people behind the I wasn't, but I got the full scoop as far as how that went.
Yeah. So that was that took me by surprise. Like we were driving out of there to go. We had scheduled months in advance. We had a creative departments, which is like graphic design, art, and sculpting and fiction. We had an outing to go play bowling that day, and we scheduled it before the Destiny event was even a thing. So like we were like rolling out there that afternoon, like, oh hey, cool. There's some people like lined up out in front of the game center. That's cool. I took a little picture of like just this little handful of people on the sidewalk. Came back, the line was flipping around the block. And I was like, what?
They really like it.
They really like it. They're real people are really excited about this. Holy crap. So it was cool. And I think that little microcosm of excitement, I think, has perpetuated throughout the entire gaming community.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool to see. And it's really gratifying and humbling that people are enjoying it so much.
Do you think that Fantasy Flight bears any burden for not betting on its own success more? You say you come in very conservative. You've had a lot of hits in my mind. Is there a reason for the conservativeness?
Well, I don't know. Like, personally speaking, like, I think we're our own worst critics when it comes to our games and our products. Like, we want them to be as good as they possibly can be, and we work on them as long as we can to make them as good as they can be. But eventually, we have to bring something to market, right? So it's really hard to stop working on a game.
Absolutely.
You always want to keep making it better, and like designers and developers will fine-tune that thing up until the last possible moment. Like they're handing it off to go to Asmodee to production, and they're like, still like writing little notes on things they can possibly change. So we don't necessarily have, I don't think, the best perspective on if our game is, or if people are going to like it or not. I mean, we like it. We think it's good. But I think the moment you start going like, oh, people are they're gonna love this. They're gonna eat this up, and then you get big-headed about it. And I think the moment you start doing that, that's just a recipe. That's just inviting disaster.
Sure.
So I think this approach it's worked for us, for the entire history of the company, and I don't think that's something that we should. I don't think we should change that. I don't think we should change that attitude.
That certainly seems to be working, at least so far. Let's talk about Mansions of Madness, because you mentioned it. We had a podcast a while back about tabletop games and the digital integration and that whole thing. Mm-hmm. And you said something that I found fascinating, that was the app allowed for the communal experience to be smoother and more enriching, these kinds of things. Is there a point for you with technology? I think Christian talks about it kind of being a curve, certainly, that you can overstep and you can understep where it's a gimmick. Where is that line for you for technological integration into games? Because there's a case to be made for, if you need an app to walk everybody through all the things going on in this game, is it just too complex to begin with? Should it just be a video game or computer game or whatever?
Well, I mean, I think that with Mansions specifically, I mean, we have a Mansions First Edition, and I don't know if you've played that.
I didn't know.
I heard about it. It has its fans. It is very ambitious, but it does a lot of things that Mansions Second does, but it did it with a bunch of cards and like a bunch of crazy setup, and it's just very cumbersome to get into. Like, once you're playing it, it was fine, but still, it's a lot of work to put on the person who played as the keeper. It really got in the way of the enjoyment, and actually, prevented it from getting to the table. And I think that's a big part about a lot of our games. We do more complex games. We generally do games that require a greater investment from the players as far as setup and your time commitment and all that. And if we have a good idea for a game that we feel like could be benefited by an app that helped make the whole setup and play process just smoother and just and more enjoyable, and it would get it to the table more, and people will have fun with it, and they're like, hey, let's come back and do this again. Then we'll do it. And I think that's what Mansions Second really does well, is it takes all the complexities of setup, bunch of disparate components that you have to do, like a little grid to kind of figure out how they all work together, and just simplifies it. Just puts it all in the app and lets the application do that work for you. And then you can just get down to the process of having fun with your friends, exploring mansions, doing cool things, fighting monsters. Like, it takes care of a bunch of really great stuff on the back end, but it doesn't do so much where it can really just exist as a video game.
Yeah.
Like, it requires a lot from the people playing the game and what you're doing like actually on the table, where I don't feel like it oversteps and gets in the way. I feel like it really just enhances the experience. I don't know if that answers your question.
There's something strange about if you imagine like the four of us sitting around a table, staring at a TV, playing a video game where we're exploring a mansion versus playing the board game, even with an app assisted. Is there anything that you can pinpoint as why it's so much different to physically be interacting with the board game as opposed to being in the same room, in the same place, but looking at the screen for the action instead?
Yeah, well, you just sit right there because you're looking at a screen.
You just checked out? Is that the...
Yeah, there's just there's a level of connection you have with somebody when you're looking them in the face versus I'm looking at a screen, we're talking, you're over here somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a different feeling. And it's fun. Like, it's fun to sit around and like do like a LAN party. That can be like a really good time.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily mean to say like one is superior to the other. But as far as a tabletop experience goes, if you want that, like let's sit around a table and have fun playing a game together where we're interacting socially with each other. I feel like that's where it's different because the app is here, and you do have to look at the app to read from time to time, but like one person is reading, right? It's almost the same as like looking at a card when you have to like read something like an adventure game or something like that, or like look something up in a rule book really quick. Everyone else at the table is not doing that. They're all like looking at their components, they're talking to each other, they're strategizing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've been talking about Runewars as well. So it's interesting you guys went into rank and file, and it's funny that you're now, so you hit the rank and file game and you hit the collectible game. So it's like you're almost going back to the origins of the hobby to start to really kind of shore up like your presence. Specifically with Runewars and the Android source book, which I think was phenomenal. Even though I can't imagine that book was designed to be the main breadwinner of the year for Fantasy Flight Games. It seemed more like a passion project. But you're really getting more into, I feel like, developing your own IPs and exploring your own universes. And so with Ruinbound and Android in particular, you now have these two starting to be pretty well fleshed out universes. Is that something you intend to continue to do in the future? And do you ultimately want these universes to be as big and as popular, or do you think they can be as something like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, that'd be great. I don't think that's a realistic expectation necessarily, but yeah, no, developing our own IPs is incredibly important, and it's really fun. You know, we have a lot of really great licensed games. We have great relationships with our licensors and really enjoy working on Star Wars, really enjoy working on Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, etc. But there's something about working on a property that is entirely your own to really allow yourself to be as creative as possible and to have a lot of fun in that creation. It's something you don't really get to do necessarily with a license. You can do it sometimes, but it takes a lot to do that.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to develop your own IPs as well. But all that work, all that scrutiny, all the iteration is all just taken care of in house, and it's a really enjoyable process for me to see it all come together, and to see our art directors developing the IP along with the writers that we work with, and the fiction editor Katrina, who spends a lot of time in our own IPs and cultivating it and making sure we have all our facts straight, because we have a bunch of games. We are really developing the Runebound IP more for Runewars than it ever has been before. But there's already a bunch of material out there that we need to reconcile with the stuff that we're creating. Because Descent, there's a bunch of story content in there that we need to take care of. the old Roombound board game that we need to look at and figure out how much of that we want to bring and adhere to. So yeah, it's and now something like Legends of the Five Rings is something that we own wholly, and we have the benefit of having a huge catalog of material to pull from as we're creating our version of Rokugan, and that's been really cool too, just to have this like huge pile of resources just like dumped in your lap, and sifting through it and figuring out like how much of that we want to carry forward and like what kind of stuff we want to do with the setting, and trying to be respectful to the source material, because we're not going to all of a sudden set Legend of the Five Rings in space.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Rokugan. Let's talk about L5R, because the very early starting to get these first looks at L5R at this point. And of course, you're going to have a split in the audience. You have new people who've never heard about it, interested. They probably came in from another Fantasy Flight property, or just kind of heard about the game and got interested. And then you also have the old players who span anywhere from the 20-year history. Could have been the very first couple years and they got out. It could be they played the entire 20. And of course, there's a lot of attachment and a lot of different feelings about where Fantasy Flight is going to take the universe. So what would you say to the old players of L5R who are concerned about Fantasy Flight's vision for their universe?
Man, I don't know if I can say anything.
Yeah?
I mean, honestly, I think if you look at like what the care we put into the work that we do, that we're not going to do anything lightly with the setting, that we're going to care for it, and we're going to think really long and hard about what we want to do with the story, what we want to do with the setting, and that we're not going to make any decisions that we feel like are frivolous or thoughtless or careless.
Yeah.
Whether or not you agree with those decisions, like I know I can't control that, and I know we can't please everybody. My hope is that you just, if you're an old Legend of the Five Rings fan, you really enjoy the setting, you're really attached to it, know that it's in capable hands. We may not do what you want with it, but hopefully you'll give it a chance and you'll like it if you give it time. Or maybe you're someone who's liked L5R for a long time and feel like we could use some freshening up.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of the approach we're taking is learning the lessons that long life of that game has provided, and we're trying to be very thoughtful about potentially relaunching it in a new and interesting way. And you'll see more as there'll be a lot more to come when it comes to developing that setting. And honestly, we're putting more work into that setting at the front end of a game launch than really we ever have in the past, and that's because we know so many people care about the setting as much as they do, and we just feel like it'd be a mistake to not treat it that way, to not put a lot of resources behind it, and not really think about the world and to develop it in a new and interesting way.
Well, how are the mechanics? I'm sure that
they're great.
I'm sure that you played it at least a few times.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
What do you think about it? So you're a long-time Netrunner player, like you said, and you've seen a lot of these LCGs come and go. What do you think about the game?
I think it's awesome. It's different than the old game. It certainly has its roots there, and it's like thematically, obviously, it's the same. It has a lot of really familiar principles. It has 2 decks, stuff that I think, optically, when you see it on the table, you're like, oh yeah, there's Legend of the Five Rings. But when you sit down and play it, it's very different. It's very modern. The Legend of the Five Rings is a very old game. It came out of the 90s. a lot has changed when it comes to design in the time since its creation, and that game also evolved over time and changed, and they bolted on things and changed things up. I think it's great. I mean, one of the things I really love about it is the resource system, fate system.
Yeah,
it's super cool. Resource systems in games are always, in card games especially, I think are always tricky, and I feel like they can either really make the game sing and it feels like a real natural component, or they can feel like they really get in your way and you're just fighting all the time to get the resources that you need to do the things you want to do. So that's honestly one of the things that I really enjoyed about Netrunner was that level of control over the resources. Like, hey, I want a credit, I can do that. I can get it. I can get it whenever I want. That's awesome. And Legend of the Five Rings does not have that, but you do have an auto-generating pool of resources every turn, and then you can determine how much you want to pay for a specific card to a point. I mean, they have a cost associated. There's always a minimum, but you can always overpay to keep them in play longer, which I think is really cool. And I think it has a great effect of getting away from the idea of having this like impenetrable avalanche, inevitable feeling to the board state, where it's like, there's all these characters out. You have all these characters out here, Steven. I can't do anything about all those characters. You are clearly going to win. Now let's just see this thing through. That's not the case with L5R. The characters can leave play through conflict, but because of the way the fate comes off of those characters every turn, they will eventually leave play on their own, which is pretty sweet. Yeah, it's a really cool system. I think it's a great engine for the game, and it makes playing it feel very natural and very fun. What I really like about it is the conflict. Yeah, is the back and forth, the kind of the sparring that you do when you're actually having. Fighting the other person's resources and characters and stuff. Yeah, that's really fun. It's an awesome back and forth. Well, you'll get a chance to try it out and see what you think.
Sounds like if you guys have essentially put out a game that solves the board state problem, and it's not necessarily a problem because there are games that is really the point, right? You're trying to slowly generate advantage, and then that's nice. It's like chess is an example of that. But to have a modern game that is able to have this kind of flow to it, not only feels very fitting for the setting, but I think it would be an entirely good experience for a competitive card game right now. So hopefully you guys have pulled it off. I guess we'll see, Andrew.
Yeah.
I got a couple of last questions about FFG in general.
Sure.
Particularly about misconceptions. So I know that we are locked into a lot of different communities, and we get a lot of feedback about Team Covenant, and it's like, oh no, that's wrong. But it's a lot of times very hard to really kind of explain what's going on or get rid of these kinds of ideas of, you guys are like this, you guys are like that.
Yeah.
And of course that happens to every business. So what about FFG do you feel like is the biggest misconception, or a few of the big misconceptions that you'd like to do your best to at least dispel?
Sure. Well, I mean, as far as your guys' audience is concerned, like I feel like you do enough interviews and features with our staff where the people who are, watch your guys' stuff understand that there's people behind the games, and that they're passionate and they care about what they're doing, and they do a really great job, and they're cool people, and they're humans, yeah. So I don't know if there's really anything I can say to your audience that would change any misconceptions, because I feel like your audience understands more or less who we are. But I think in the gaming community as a whole, I feel like there is a feeling that like we're the big company, and we are a big corporate board game, card game machine that's just
it's a big monolith,
pumping stuff out there. And I can certainly see how people could come to that perception. But when you look at us compared to like other companies in other industries, like we're pretty small. I mean, I guess we are pretty big for a board game company.
Yeah.
Because we're like, right around 60-ish people in the studio. But grand scheme of things, it's a small group, and when you think about the amount of stuff that we put out every year, and then think, right around there's 60 people who are responsible for generating all of that content. It's pretty astounding. So we have a lot of really, really small teams. Like when I say teams, some of those teams are one person.
Yeah.
working on a particular game line to get it out there. So it's almost like we're a bunch of tiny little companies doing one, all doing our own little thing. So I think that's maybe one misconception I think a lot of people have is that we are this kind of like big corporate monolith driven by market forces. Trying to hit like target demographics, et cetera, and that's not really the case. Like really, we're just trying to make the games that we think are cool and that hopefully other people will enjoy as well.
Yeah.
And we're just we're passionate people.
Well, what is the direction of FFG over the next year or two? What are you focused on as the guy at the top?
Well, yeah, like I said, I've only been doing this job for a few months now, like since January. So a lot of my focus has been, just figuring out what the hell I'm doing. So I think I'm doing all right.
All right, so check that box first.
Yes, figure out what the hell I'm doing. One, getting that sorted out. I think my focus. My personal focus right now is just on the studio itself and on the staff, and helping to make Fantasy Flight Games a place that where you come to work, you're energized, you're excited, you're passionate about what you do, you feel like if you have concerns, they're being listened to.
Yeah.
And if you have ideas, they're being heard. That stuff is really important to me because I do really care personally about the entire staff. So that's kind of number one on my list right now. From a customer's perspective, it's not like that's getting in the way of us doing like new, cool, interesting games. We have a lot of we have some crazy stuff that we're going to be doing in the next year and a half that I think is going to come as a big surprise to some people. It's still kind of a surprise. Some of it's still kind of a surprise to me. So I think that our customers will be surprised as well. So yeah, there's cool stuff to look forward to, absolutely. And obviously we have, apart from like the new crazy interesting things that no one's expecting, we're going to keep rolling ahead with Destiny.
Yeah.
We're going to keep charging forward with Runewars. We have Legend of the Five Rings that are going to be launching, and then we'll be following up with that with a bunch of packs and associated products that I think people will really enjoy. We have the Arkham Horror, the card game, which is something I thought that we also launched last year. That I totally left off.
How did we miss Arkham?
Yeah, that's
crazy.
Huge. So that's going to continue. I think you can expect your favorite games to continue to receive excellent, dedicated support, and look forward to the stuff that you're not necessarily aware of or expecting.
Yeah, wicked. Well, hey, we'll be paying attention. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Steven.
This is Andrew Navaro, head of FFG Studios, and thank you guys so much for watching. We are here at Star Wars Worlds, I guess what we call that now.
Yeah, sure.
So that's exciting, and we have tons of content from this on our channel, so check that out, and catch more from us later. See you guys.